Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SASS podcast. I'm glad you're here. You've just tuned into one of the most important podcasts that you may ever listen to, because the purpose of this podcast is to provide a safe space for victims and survivors of rape and sexual assault to share their stories and connect with others who've been through similar experiences. However, there are other important aspects to this podcast: community, education, and support. I believe that sharing our stories is one of the most important steps to healing, and my hope is that the SASS podcast will help victims and survivors feel less alone and more empowered. And my ultimate goal is to provide all of my listeners with insights, resources, and a supportive space where empathy, compassion, and understanding thrive. My commitment is to being there for all my listeners. I'm your host, Dave Markel, coming to you from the Podvlog studio in St. George, Utah, and I'm here each week talking to victims and survivors or interviewing experts and professionals in order to not only gain insights and information to help us on our healing path, but also to provide an education on being trauma-informed, working to help bring justice to victims and survivors of rape and sexual assault. Whether you're aware of it or not, we all know someone whose life has been impacted by rape or sexual assault. So I encourage everyone to listen to this podcast. Whatever your experience is with rape or sexual assault, you are not alone, and we are all here for each other. Thank you again for being here. Hi, everyone. Happy New Year, and welcome to the first episode of 2024 of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SASS podcast. This is episode 65, and this week I'm presenting a continuation from last week. The episode was a hit, and I received such great feedback and comments about the show that I decided that as my first episode of this new year, I would compile the comments that the rest of my 2023 guests had made and put together this part 2. As I mentioned last week, I couldn't be more thrilled and appreciative of the comments that these guests made, because it shows that my goals and purposes for this podcast are being met. And I also want to emphasize what a blessing it is for me to be able to provide this platform for victims and survivors who are willing to share their stories of rape and sexual assault. These stories not only help the guests, but also offer healing and growth to my listeners, which is absolutely amazing. As you'll hear from these clips, each one of these guests has chosen to recognize and celebrate the SASS format and their healing from being a part of this podcast. They've also noted the hosting, the purposes, and the successes of this podcast. Please take the time to not only listen to these former guests, but also to subscribe to and rate this podcast. Then tell everyone you know about how this podcast is changing lives and helping victims and survivors heal and grow. Thank you for being a listener of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories. And again, Happy New Year. Thank you for tuning into this episode. I hope you get something out of it. Let's get to it. I'll catch you on the other side.
But to know that I'm talking to people that have gone through something like I have or even worse, and maybe they're too scared or maybe they haven't said anything, to know that I am able to speak. I just hope that they hear me and they know that I care and I know what it feels like, and I know how bad it can make somebody feel like there's no hope, like there's just no reason to be here, but there is. Life's amazing.
Thank you, Dave. I'm honored to be here. You are doing such an amazing job with this podcast and providing a platform for survivors to tell their stories. I couldn't be more pleased to be here and to help you on your journey to help end sexual violence.
I appreciate the opportunity. I spend a lot of time directing people to my episode with you. We were talking about earlier, I think it came out on Valentine's Day this year.
Right.
Of 2023. Mm-hmm. So I direct people to that because that podcast I did with you was was the most raw, the most intimate, detailed experience.
Well, I love the mission. I mean, it just speaks to me like so much. When you introduced yourself and I read about you and I listened to some of the podcasts, I was just like, wow, it's amazing. You're very much in alignment with that vision, and that's what I appreciate is that you carry very similar values. You're out there creating a safe space, but you're also like following something inside of yourself. There's a reason that you're feeling this desire and calling to want to give, and also to give a new lens on trauma and informed approaches, particularly with law enforcement. And I think that's mind-blowing, and I want to contribute toward that. That's something that is important to me.
I would just love to tell the audience, thank you for hearing my story. Thank you for the support, and share and speak out and tell whoever you need to tell. Somebody's out there that will listen to you and help you out.
This relationship that we're building is meaningful to me as well. I knew that from the first moment we talked on the phone. I was like, I like Dave. And I love your background. Thank you for all those years that you dedicated your life to serving victims and trying to bring justice, whatever that means, to the person that was stuck in the system.
Thank you. Oh, God, I'm so glad I found your podcast. So glad.
That's why I've shared everything today, because this is how you get over it. Sharing is unleashing the load, and it's scary. No one wants to talk about sexual abuse. No one wants to hear it. No guy wants to say they was fucking almost raped by the dad, you know. No one wants to do that, but you must if you want to move past it. You don't have to do it as vocal as this. You don't have to go on podcasts, but you must tell people. This is the first place I've shared so much and in so much detail in one narrative, and it's felt quite good to express it all in one go as well.
My child knows I am doing this podcast. It is being done with absolute permission. I am not saying anything that they don't already know or that we have not talked about.
I think me coming here on the show is part of me just going through another step to go further in my healing journey and just tell the world what I believe more in is just to say it. Just be that voice that it's okay to share, nothing to be ashamed of.
Thank you so much. I can't even express the gratitude I have for that. I really appreciate it so much. It's been a huge inspiration, the way you communicated with me and the fact that you just take the time out of your day or night to talk to me. I'm immensely grateful for it. Thank you so much.
That does it for another episode of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SASS podcast. Thank you so very much for being a part of my listening audience. I recognize that I wouldn't be here if it weren't for you, so keep knowing that I appreciate you listening in. And as always, if you're a victim or survivor of rape or sexual assault, and you feel you're ready to tell your story to further your healing journey or to help others as they progress on theirs, please email me at davemarkel@gmail.com. That's DAVEMARKEL@gmail.com, and we'll talk about the possibility of you being on this show. Thank you again for listening to Sexual Assault Survivor Stories. And if you're not already, please become a subscriber by clicking on the subscribe button on whatever platform you're hearing this podcast on right now. Then be sure to rate the podcast and, of course, tell everyone you know about what we're doing here, which is helping bring justice to victims and survivors of rape and sexual assault. I'm truly looking forward to another great year of providing a weekly platform for victims and survivors of rape and sexual assault. And I want to wish each one of you a very happy new year. Please tune in next week for another powerful episode of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories as we return to our regular format and I present another survivor of rape or sexual assault who's willing to tell their story to help bring justice to victims and survivors of rape and sexual assault. And in the meantime, please do your part to start by believing, because we all know someone whose life has been impacted. Check out the Start by Believing website for more information on this important campaign at startbybelieving.org. We'll see you next week.